we doing, everybody? This is Splash of Gas with Dave Weichert, a NASCAR racing podcast. As we enter the 8th week of the NASCAR offseason, Christmas has came and passed. Hope everyone had a great one. 2026 is right around the corner. But there is still much racing action to keep us on our toes. We have 2 episodes this week. The first will break down all the off-season NASCAR news recently. The second will preview for the Mecca of the micros, the Tulsa Shootout. Plus, paint scheme of the week, NASCAR history time, an exclusive Splash of Gas interview with Carson Ware as he touches on his off-track battles. And now back racing, we go over his exciting 2025 season. You won't want to miss that one, and so much more on this episode of Splash of Gas. This episode is dedicated to my grandmother, Doris Weichert, who recently passed away peacefully in her sleep at age 92. Was so blessed to have her in my life. Her, along with my grandfather, taught me a great love for sports. Even though she wasn't a gearhead, the last several years while I've been doing my podcast, having races on the Sunday and the fall, sometimes my uncle or my dad might want to change it to a ball game or something else, and my grandmother would always yap at them and say, "Hey, David needs to race on for his podcast." And I always appreciated that. We'll always remember watching the last 3 championship races with you, Trucks, Xfinity, and Cup this past year as we cheered on for the Mike Harmon Racing 74 in the Truck and Xfinity series. Rest in peace, Grandma, and say hello to Grandpa for me. Love you. As always, we're sponsored by Magical Travel with Dave, a.k.a. Disney Dave Weichert, my father. He will be able to help you with all your Disney and Universal vacation needs. He can be reached at DisneyDaveW@Verizon.net. Please make sure you follow all the Splash of Gas social medias for midweek and on-track updates. Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube are all Splash of Gas with Dave Weichert. Not to continue with more sad news, but more heartbreaking news in the NASCAR community. Sunday, December 28th, Dennis Hamlin, father of NASCAR driver Denny Hamlin, was killed in a fire at his North Carolina home. Dennis's wife, Mary Lou, was critically injured in the fire and is in a local hospital. Denny Hamlin had previously spoken about his father's health battles, and that was specifically highlighted before the Championship 4 race at Phoenix this past season. Thoughts and prayers to the Hamlin family. Heartbroken for Denny, was getting pretty emotional when talking about his father before the championship. Rest in peace, Dennis Hamlin. Now for trivia question time. This episode's question is, what year did the Tulsa Shootout start? Answer coming at the end. Now for discussions with Dave. First topic, Cup Series point structure. We have been talking about this topic throughout this past season, and it was even more highlighted after the Cup Series championship race in Phoenix. There has been a lot of support going away from the one race run for a championship and going into a multiple race final playoff round, which, in all honesty, I kind of believe is what is going to happen for 2026, but still NASCAR crickets on it. It's been still a lot of talk about it. There has been more and more traction than I truthfully thought for the full 36 race point schedule. Believe a month ago when we were last talking about this, I was really not supportive of it. I was saying at the end of these races, at the end of these race seasons, could be cars that could be blank. Sponsors are going to pull out if there's no point of their driver being in the race, if he doesn't have a good chance at, a championship, which the playoff structure, the way it has been, supports that. Dale Jr. was again recently talking about this on the download, and he even said himself was surprised how much more traction that this idea is gaining. And yes, could this affect sponsorship deals at the end of some of these seasons? It could. But if you do go to a 36 race full season point system. A Kansas in April, Watkins Glen is in May now, Nashville at the end of May. It's going to make those races so much more exciting. And that was one con of the playoff system. Some of those early season, regular season races just didn't wet the whistle for some, and I think that will solve that issue. I'm still not 100% sold on the idea, but regardless of what NASCAR decides, still gonna have my support. To the next topic, but really just an example of what we were talking about, the Lucas Oil Late Model Dirt Series plans in 2026 to return to a season-long point format, abandoning the four-driver chase format they've been using the previous 3 seasons. Series director Rick Shawali has reiterated the National Tour's point fund will remain the same. Really interesting to see a top motorsports series abandoning a playoff system and going back to a point system. Literally the same topic NASCAR is debating right now. We'll have eyes on the Lucas Oil Dirt Series this year to see how that bodes for them. Next topic, tire news. Hoosier Racing Tire to continue their exclusive tire of the ARCA Menard Series. I was yesterday years old when I realized that Hoosier Tire owns General Tire, which is the main tire of ARCA Series. Been going to races for years. When there's an ARCA race, you see the General Tire 18-wheeler, typically next to the Goodyear one, nonetheless. They're the tire of ARCA. When you go to any short track, what do you see? You see Hoosier. I really thought Hoosier had the deals with all the short tracks and General Tire had their deal with ARCA. I had no clue they were the same. Different, but same, I guess. For as long I can remember, General Tire has been the main tire sponsor of ARCA. Think it's great for a name like General Tire, then of course Hoosier Racing, to continue their support of the ARCA series. Think it only makes that series stronger. Last topic on discussions with Dave this episode, Austin Hill, scheduled for 5 O'Reilly Auto Part races in 2026. Not that Austin Hill, Austin J. Hill. Was talking about Austin J. at the end of last year when he was making some starts at the then Xfinity Series. The road course expert has announced his schedule for 2026. He will race at COTA, the Glen, Naval Base Coronado, Sonoma, and the Charlotte Roval to wrap up his 2026 O'Reilly schedule. Last year, Hill placed 20th in his lone start at Watkins Glen for Joey Gase Motorsports. Can we see 2 Austin Hills run up front in 2026? We'll find out. And that wraps up this episode's edition of Discussions with Dave. In 2025, as I mentioned, throughout several episodes, Splash of Gas, we did a small partnership, associate sponsorship with Mike Harmon Racing. Several different drivers between the truck and Xfinity ride. The next guest we bring on, Carson Ware, was in the car in Talladega when he put the 74, its best finish of the season, P21. Wasn't on track that weekend. Nonetheless, the content and pictures we got that weekend was top notch. Have greatly appreciated all of Carson's time. This interview not only touches on the recent on-track action, but also Carson's story. Carson, very open with his battles with addiction. I've had my own battles with that too. The detail, analogies, then getting back behind the wheel. Truly hope you all enjoy. Here's what Carson had to say. Next guest we bring onto the show just wrapped up his 2025 NASCAR Xfinity schedule with a strong run at Talladega, plus went to victory lane at Ace Speedway in the Pro Late Model on the Cars Tour, Carson Ware. Thanks for joining the show, Carson.
I appreciate you having me, man.
Yeah, of course. Starting on the late model side of things, as mentioned, you nabbed the win at Ace. had some tough competition in that one. How was the 51 handling that night, and how were you feeling once the checker waved? You seemed pretty pumped up getting out of the car.
Oh yeah, man, that was one of the more special wins of my career. That was, this year was kind of my return to racing in general, whether that be in the Xfinity Series, well now known as the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series, and late models. The weekend before, Luke Baldwin just did an excellent job at Orange County getting our first win in Cars Tour and the first win for our newly formed team with Cars Tour. So I definitely had big shoes to fill, and Luke Baldwin's an excellent driver. So in a good way, the pressure was on, right? That the car was dialed in and obviously showed a lot of speed at Orange County. So I wanted to be able to follow that up and give us a good run. And I struggled a bit in qualifying this year, and unfortunately put myself in some scenarios where we should have had better runs and honestly more wins, but started off a little bit farther back in the field than I would have liked. I think I qualified like sixth or something like that, and quickly drove through the field, got towards the front, and on entering turn one, there was a patch of oil or something that went down. A couple cars got loose and spun out, so I was able to dive down to the bottom and clear them and get to P1 for the next restart. I'm the type of guy, man, if I can get to the front of the field and, the car's dialed in, which, Troy Smith and JR and all of our regular racing guys did a phenomenal job this entire year in every single race of just giving us freaking raw speed race cars, and I know Luke's, attested to that also. But, once we got to the front, man, and we just led every single lap, and, it was lights out after that. And, again, that one was really special because, I'd had, some bumps in the roads and things that I had to overcome to get back to racing. And, that was a big win for my career. And, obviously the Cars Tour has a lot of prestige and a lot of, a large reputation for being extremely competitive and the best guys running it in both classes. So that was a very exciting and also emotional win. It felt good, and I needed that, and I was glad I was able to deliver what that car was capable of, man, because that was definitely the car to beat that night.
Awesome. Really appreciate all the detail from there. You mentioned Luke Baldwin, and there's a slew of a couple other drivers that drove that car this year, along with Luke, who scored 2 wins. Your brother Cody, Harrison Burton, Mason Maggio, you make up the driver lineup for the 51. Luke, with the P2 finish at North of Wilkesboro, secures Rick Ware Racing the Owners Championship on the Z-Max on Cars Tour on the late model side. What was it like being a part of that group? It seems like you have a very team-oriented mindset.
Oh yeah, everybody that ran, whether it was Luke, me, Cody, Harrison, or Mason, man, all of us have won late model races, and obviously you see where Harrison Burton's at and his career and all the things he's accomplished. I mean, he's a Daytona winner, and with Luke and all his prestige, whether it's in the modifieds or late models and other forms of racing, now that he's started his way in the truck series, and Mason and all of us, I mean, Mason's won a bunch of races too. It's like, everybody in that car was a race winning driver. And, we knew that, we put all the pieces together to win the championship. That was the only thing we were worried about, man, is, we had our eyes set on that Owners Championship, and, everybody did their job and helped us secure the points and put together a whole season of, whether it's race wins or top 5s and top 10s every single race and not falling out. And, even if we did have a problem, we still finished the race. And, that's that's how you win a championship. Nobody gave up at any point in time during the career. And I'm extremely thankful I could be a small part of that roster. And, it's something that we can, cherish and hold on to for the rest of our lives, saying that we, won an Owners Championship in Cars Tour as an organization under my dad's name. And, had guys like Harrison and Luke and Cody and Mason a part of it. So it makes it even more special. Got it.
Appreciate you touching on how special it was that I've had Harrison and Mason on the show throughout this past season, and was just at Turkey Derby watching Luke along with Jack too in the modifieds, and they were looking good. So really appreciate that detail. Before we get into the Xfinity action, you just mentioned your dad Rick Ware. You grew up in a racing family. You and your brother have started your own path in motorsports. But always been impressed by the various motorsports that RWR has competed in the past, IndyCar and NHRA, motocross, flat track, Cup Series, and now on the Cars Tour. What was it growing up in that atmosphere?
Well, it's definitely you definitely get accustomed to high stress, right? That's kind of the norm with racing, and I think an aspect that is different than others in some cases. It's racing was how we made a living. We didn't have, and we still don't. Our only source of income is by operating as Rick Ware Racing and racing. So there's times where we've had financial ups and downs, and have had to have serious talks as a family about what stuff might look like moving forward. And as a kid, you don't necessarily understand the severity of some of those conversations, and you're just too young and naive to really understand the seriousness of it. But it's created, and we still are an extremely close, tight knit family. And this business can be very cutthroat and brutal at times, but I wouldn't change any of it for anything. And I've created lifelong memories with my family growing up at the racetrack around people like Stanton Barrett and Derek Cope and Carl Long and all these guys that I grew up watching my dad race with, or race for. And those are things that I'll cherish for the rest of my life and tell my kids and my grandkids about one day. And again, very, very high stress, and definitely get to experience things and see places that some other families may not be as fortunate to do. But definitely wasn't something that happened overnight. My father worked really hard for everything that we have, and is still working hard every single day for our family, and he's chasing his dream, which is very infectious as a son of his. As you see how passionate and how much love he has for the sport of racing in general. And as a byproduct, it's not just that we're in the NASCAR Cup Series. Like you said, we're with the American Flat Track Association and racing for them, and the World Supercross and NHRA Top Fuel, and I've had an IMSA team and done stuff in IndyCar. I mean, it's not just it's more than just a business for us. It's the whole reason it started is my dad's passion for racing and motorsports, and that's been our way of life from the time I was born, and even before I was born, and it's still like that today.
Got it. Really appreciate the honesty. It's a business, like you said, but really all about the people. I appreciate you touching on that. You've been open with your battles with addiction, as I was saying before the interview. I've had my own struggles with that. Everyone's battle is different. How were you able to overcome that? And I know you said the win at Ace was really meant a lot to you. But how were you feeling being back in the Xfinity car last fall in Bristol after everything?
Yeah, that was again, like you said, it's no secret that I struggle with alcoholism and addiction, and that even started to resonate before I really even started racing. And it's something that I've had to learn. And when I was younger, I didn't understand or get the whole thing of disease is addiction is a disease, and a lot of it's genetics and stuff, and habits formed and whatnot. But as I grew older and those things developed more, and unfortunately it always gets worse as they develop. And it's something that I've had to learn, and I kind of spoke with you before. It's like, it never hurt. It ended up hurting me more to not be open and talk about those things, because not only does it help me, bringing it to light and just being open and honest about it and sharing about my experiences, but it also can help somebody else. And I've learned the importance of that. And, whether it's, me racing in the O'Reilly series or late models or whatever, right? It's, to some degree I do have a small platform, right? And heck, even if I can, share with a couple of people at a racetrack or through an Instagram DM or on X or whatever, right? If I can share my experience and let someone know where I've been and where I'm at now, and show them that there is hope and there is help out there, that can be successful, and that there are other people that can relate or that have the same feelings or struggles that someone else does. It's all about not feeling alone, right? I know, like we shared, it's like there's been times in my life where I've had, people around me everywhere, but I felt like I was the most lonely person in the room, right? And, I hope that maybe I can help somebody in their struggles, or maybe not even just help them, but just be there for someone and have someone to talk to about it. So I'm very big on being open about it. And, I'm thankful to be, sober today, and still moving forward and knocking down another day sober each day. And, if it weren't for my sobriety and if it weren't for my family and everybody's support, I would have nothing. And essentially I would be nothing. The disease of addiction, alcoholism, is doing push-ups even when you're not paying attention to it, and it's never going to get weaker. And I'm just thankful for those who have supported me and those who have been there for me and helped me, get back on my feet and keep moving forward, man.
Got it. Thank you so much for sharing that. It's difficult to talk about, but being open about it, just like you said, it is one of the best things for that. So now that this past Xfinity season's action, you run 5 races with 3 different teams, MHR, SS Greenlight, and Joey Gase. You've ran previously for each team, but how is it racing for different teams? On the outside looking in, can seem difficult to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say, each team, and this is a fact, each team that I've ran for has had a huge part of my career. And, it's very important to acknowledge how hard each one of those teams works. They may not particularly have all the resources that the other teams have on every single weekend. There's some weekends where, we have some more funding and can make more stuff happen. But, the amount of hard work and effort and passion that, Joey Gase and Bobby Dotter and Mike Harmon and all those guys have, it's tremendous. I'd compare it that they have just as much, if not more, than any other team owner in the series. And, for me, that's, had some ups and downs and stuff. And, path in Xfinity hasn't been absolutely direct, right? But, I enjoy getting to go battle with those guys. And, everybody knows when we show up, we're one of the more underfunded teams, but, we can go put together a good run and go race hard and bring together solid finishes, man. It just makes it that much more sweeter, right? And, I've had to do some battling and stuff in my life and, off the racetrack, that is. And, I love to do it with those guys on the track because when we get to celebrate, like you said, a 21st finish at Talladega with Mike Harmon and those guys, when we show up with a dually and what I call a late model trailer, right?
Yeah.
And everybody else has got stackers. It's like, man, we just freaking finished 21st on the lead lap. You know what I mean? And that stuff is very meaningful. And I value those moments a lot because, not only is it exciting and important for me, but it also means that much more to those guys and those teams.
100%. When you're battling in the trenches with those people, makes it a lot sweeter when you do have a good finish. Going right into the next question, this past October, you get the call again to pilot the 74 for Mike Harmon, this time at Dega. You made starts throughout your career with them. 2025 was the show's first year being a small associate sponsor with them, including at Talladega. I have nothing but good things to say with my interactions with Mike and Karen and everyone there. How's it like working with everyone at MHR?
Oh, man, it's awesome. I love Mike, and Mike has always had my back and done absolutely anything he could for me. And, the Talladega story is actually pretty funny because, I had some scenarios put together to drive Talladega for some different teams and stuff. And, in this business, especially with the lower funded teams, deals get put together last minute or, something may change where someone might have a little more money. And, that's very valuable to the team owners and whatnot and to keep operations going. So sometimes, you think you got a ride put together and, it's just part of the business that sometimes you lose that ride the same week, right? So I think it was probably Tuesday or Wednesday that, I had a conversation with Mike and, he was going to Talladega and needed a driver. And I was like, well, shoot, man, I think I could probably grab together some sponsorship dollars. And I called up, Costa and got them to commit to some funding and help for that weekend. And shoot, 2 days later, I was showing up to Talladega and driving the car. So it was kind of funny that one of the least planned scenarios and least amount of prep, we showed up and had my best finish of the year. So it's kind of hectic, like I mentioned earlier, and being in racing and growing up in it, you never know what's going to happen, especially, when you don't have a full season deal put together. But that was a really cool scenario. Like I said, right, a little bit of prep, last minute notice, and that was our best finish of the whole year, so that was really exciting. And, to be able to do that with Mike and, how hard and how long he's been in the business, it's, like I said, it makes it that much more sweeter. And everybody at MHR is, phenomenal and full of heart and a lot of passion. And everybody works extremely, extremely hard.
Got that right. Kind of getting to the in-car action of that race, you avoid several wrecks, and just like you said, P21 finish was going nuts with my family in New Jersey watching that. Seems like it took some patience in the race. But how were you feeling getting out of the 74 in that one?
Yeah, no, dude, it was exciting, man. I mean, like you said, we had to just run our race, and we knew going into it we'd probably be down a little bit on motor, and again, not having all the resources and stuff that the other teams may have had that weekend, but we knew, and I kept telling the guys, I told them, I said, I don't care where we end up in qualifying, I don't care, where we end up, on the board, but I said, as long as we cross that finish line and finish the race, I said, we're going to have a great day. I just kept telling them, and I'm big on, believing in manifestation and stuff. I think that stuff's real. And, I told the guys, I said, if we finish this race, we're going to have a great day. I didn't know where that meant, right? Could have been 25th, could have been, P5, could have won the race. I said, but if we just cross that finish line, and that's just super speedway racing, right? Like, if you can finish Talladega or Daytona, that you can come out with a good day. You know what I mean? So my goal was just to finish the race in one piece, not put a mark on the car, and bring home a good day. And I think that we did an excellent job at executing that. And, that was my best finish. And I believe Mike Harmon's best finish for that year as well. So, it was a great way to end off my part-time schedule in the Xfinity Series in 2025 with a P21 and, moving towards 2026.
Yeah. Got that right. No, was as a small supporter for Mike, I mean, it really was the best finish, and was as you mentioned, awesome way to cap off the year. I'd like to ask this next question to the drivers that run different series recently. What's the differences or similarities from pro late model Xfinity cars? I know the engines are a little bit different, but just curious to see what you have to say as a driver.
Yeah, I think, obviously both cars drive differently. I'd say that, late model stocks have more similarities to an Xfinity car than a Pro Late does. But obviously, the top end speed, right? At Pocono, we're, doing 100 and change and freaking, hauling the mill at 160, 180 going into the corner at turn one. And, at a place like, Hickory or somewhere, it's like you're probably going 70, 80, 90, right? So, obviously the top end speed's a little bit different. And, as you make starts in NASCAR and stuff, the speed doesn't really, matter as much. But, different track sizes and different grip levels of when you're going, more high rate of speeds and, just the handling is a little bit different. But, I think the late models in general are a great way to, get quality seat time and prep yourself for those truck and Xfinity starts. But, I've had a blast. It keeps you on your toes when you're, bouncing between a pro late model or a late model in general and hopping in, a truck or O'Reilly car. It's different forms of racing in a sense as far as, racing styles and your when you hop into a late model, we're racing for wins and we're running up front. So your expectations and your goals for the day start to change a little bit because, the circumstances are different, in those two garages where, we can show up and unload for a win in a pro late any day across the country, but, may not have that same equipment or opportunity in Xfinity, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, for sure. Really do appreciate you touching upon that. Was a new Smyrna the start of this past year. Saw your brother Cody run at the Clyde hard, and man, Daytona was great, but New Smyrna, the super late models was that was the most exciting racing of the weekend, just being right there on the fence. So just big fan of late model racing. So appreciate you touching on those differences. And last question, just like you were saying, deals on the O'Reilly side can kind of come last second. But as a driver, what are your goals right now for next year?
Well, we just finalized and did my deal for 26, actually about an hour before we hopped on this call. So there'll soon be an announcement for 26. But, I can definitely, assure you guys that, we'll have the best motors and resources that I've ever had at my disposal. And
awesome.
Also having, manufacturer sim time and being able to have access to things that I haven't had in the past that I think are going to be able to, turn into speed and better results on track. And, also too with the late model racing that I'll be doing this year as well. And, it's going to be a huge year for my career and building up momentum for 27. And, it's I think excited's not the best word because I'm overly excited. So it's going to be a great year, and I'm thankful for all my partners and new sponsorships that we get to announce and just get rolling into 2026 full speed.
Heck yeah, appreciate that sneak peek. Super excited for you to hear that news soon. So thank you so much for your time again, Carson. Greatly appreciate it, and can't wait to see you at Daytona in 2026, man.
I appreciate it, man. Thank you for having me, and I appreciate your time, and I'll see you in Daytona, dude.
Yep, sounds good. Sounds great. Thanks, Carson.
Yep.
See ya.
Hope everyone enjoyed that interview. Truly struck by the openness and honesty that Carson gave, plus all the detail. Super stoked to hear his plans for 2026. You can hear his excitement. Now for Paint Scheme of the Week. Throwing it back, but to a holiday scheme, the Terry Labonte's Kellogg's 5, and not the traditional Kellogg's paint scheme. This had a twist to it, a holiday one, and the Grinch was on the hood. Hope everyone checks that one out. Now for NASCAR history time. This episode we touch on some of the famous all-star races in NASCAR history. 1989. It was rare for a single race to completely reshape how a driver is viewed. But that year's all-star race did that. At the time, Darrell Waltrip was one of the most polarizing figures in the sport, known for his aggressive driving style, never shying away from controversy. And in that year's race, late in the race with just 2 laps remaining, Darrell was out front, looked like he had it sealed, when Rusty Wallace made contact with him and sent him spinning, clearing the way for Rusty to take the win. Tempers would boil over immediately as the checkered flag waved. Both teams clashed, brawling in pit lane, and an emotional Waltrip delivered one of the most memorable quotes, saying, "I hope he chokes on that 200,000. And almost like a current day switch with fans being more keen to Kyle Busch, at that point, more fans started to sympathize with Waltrip. 2000 All-Star Race. Each spring, former Charlotte Motor Speedway president Humpy Wheeler made a habit of predicting the winner of the All-Star Race. In 2000, one of those predictions struck a nerve with Dale Earnhardt when Wheeler boldly picked Dale Earnhardt Jr., Earnhardt Sr.'s son, the rookie, to win the Cup Series All-Star Race. That, of course, was Jr.'s first All-Star race, and Dale Sr. did not like the prediction because it put unneeded pressure, as he thought, on Jr. But Wheeler's forecast proved correct. On the final lap, Earnhardt Jr. made the decisive move, passing Dale Jarrett to score a dramatic victory and ignite a massive family celebration. "I couldn't wait to see my dad," Jr. recalled later. What a call by Humpy Wheeler. That wraps up this episode's edition of NASCAR History Time. Coming to the end of this episode means trivia answer time. This episode's question is, what year did the Tulsa Shootout start? Answer is 1985. This will be the 41st running of the Tulsa Shootout. As always, we're sponsored by Magical Travel with Dave, aka Disney Dave Weichert, my father. He will be able to help you with all your Disney and Universal vacation needs. He can be reached at DisneyDaveW@Verizon.net. Please make sure you follow all the Splash of Gas social medias for midweek and on-track updates. Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube are all Splash of Gas with Dave Weichert. Hope everyone enjoyed our interview with Carson Ware, and hope you all continue to have a great holiday season and Happy New Year with your friends and family. Till next time, Splash of Gas out.